Peter Tatchell also joins me. He's a very well-known human rights and LGBT rights campaigner. Peter, what a privilege to be talking to you on this subject. It is, of course, today so important that we do make sure that trans people or people considering transitioning or wanting to experiment with gender are respected, aren't humiliated, have access to services and do not have their own rights compromised. But do you think there's been a little bit of overreach when you've got feminists saying, well, not just feminists, just everyday women saying, why do we now have to use unisex toilets? Or, people saying it's a bit worrying that children might be being sent on journeys towards changing their gender at too young an age?
Well, first, let me say that I am not trans and I do not speak on behalf of the trans community. I have nothing to gain by speaking on this issue. It won't benefit or help me in any way, but I'm coming to this issue as an independent human rights campaigner, mindful of both the human rights of women and trans women included. Now, for me, listening to Kelly J, I felt that the underlying ethos of what she was saying was to demonize trans people in the same way that homophobes used to demonize gay people. She's promoting all kinds of scare scenarios which do not apply to 99.9% of trans women. And I think it's very wrong to generalize and on the basis of what a handful, and literally a handful of trans women have done that is bad, to generalize from that to suggest that all trans women are a threat and that to protect other women, they have to be excluded. We do not say that because a tiny unrepresentative minority of Muslims are terrorists, that therefore the whole Muslim community should be demonized as terrorists and terrorist sympathizers. We do not treat Muslim people like that. We know that is totally wrong. And it's equally wrong to apply the same kind of logic to this issue about trans people. The vast majority of trans people in this country, they act and look like women. In fact, they've been using women's toilets for decades without anybody complaining because no one noticed and there were no incidents. On top of that, the issue of trans self-identification, that self-ID exists already in over 10 countries. I think it's about 15 countries now, including Ireland, Malta, Norway, Denmark, Portugal, and several others. There's never been a problem. Women's rights have not been compromised by trans self-ID. And just to remind everyone, the trans person simply can't go and just declare that they're trans. They have to sign a statutory declaration with a witness, a justice of the peace, or a notary public. So this is a complex, not a simple process. It's not that complex, but it's not something they can just do on a whim. And I think that we must always remember that in reality, there is no conflict between trans rights and women's rights. Trans women are women, and they suffer like other women from misogyny, discrimination, harassment, sexual assault, and even hate crime. So that surely should give all women, including trans women, a common interest in working together. And I'm so pleased that many, many feminists take the same view. They say we are feminists, but we are trans inclusive feminists. We recognize that trans women get a raw deal. They suffer because they are trans women, and therefore let's work together to support them and support each other.
But in terms of, Kelly J isn't here to sort of answer to the points that you made specifically about her. But what I was saying was talking about the debate seems to become so prominent that a couple of things have come up during the course of this programme. One is the viewpoint that perhaps it's becoming so prominent that it might be directing young people who perhaps do not have the intellectual maturity to make life-changing decisions onto pathways that they're perhaps not suited for. And then the other was how we're now seeing an explosion in things such as unisex toilets, which perhaps both men and women find that uncomfortable. I certainly, as a woman, certainly do, and personally think it's a bit of a security issue. I wouldn't want to go into a toilet in a bar, in a busy bar late at night, that men were also using. So how have we got to this point where I think you very cogently and rationally put forward the argument that, as you said, but men who identify as women have been living trans lives for decades, have been using women's facilities without any uproar. Why have we reached this horrible state of antimony now, where it seems like two sides are going to war against each other?
Well, first, let me say that from the many trans people that I know and support, none of them enter into transitioning lightly. For them, it's often been a gut-wrenching experience. No one would willingly want to be trans, given the scale of prejudice, discrimination, and hate crime that they suffer. They only take the steps down this road because they feel it is fundamental to who they are. And there's masses of all kinds of evidence to suggest that trans identity is not some whim or fancy. It is deeply rooted in the psyche of these people. And they are giving expression to who they truly are. It's about expressing their own inner self. And I would, as a libertarian, as someone who believes in freedom of everybody to make their own choices, I think it's so wrong to say that they shouldn't do that. On the question of unisex toilets, there are very few places that only have unisex toilets, although there are some places who've had them for many, many decades. And unisex toilets usually include not only a single entrance, so once you're in that toilet, I went to an event 2 weeks ago in the open air. All the toilets there were unisex. It was a little portable toilet, and men and women used them interchangeably. Whoever was in the queue, there wasn't any problem. I actually asked the organizers, "Have you had a problem with these unisex toilets?" They said no. And they said, "We've been doing this for 6 years. We've never ever had a problem." So again, I think it's some people are making a mountain out of a molehill. Some people are projecting a fear and a problem that really is not there. And as I said, you can't base policy on what a few bad apples might do. All kinds of people do all kinds of bad things, but we don't generalize. We don't ban cars because some people drive irresponsibly. I think we just have to put things in perspective.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. And it's a shame it has got to the point that it's become such a polarising debate. Peter, thank you.
It's heartbreaking for me, as someone who supported women's liberation for over 50 years and attended many of their protests. It is heartbreaking to see a minority of feminists who are so resistant to supporting their trans sisters. I can remember in the early 1970s, the women's liberation movement, one of its battle cries was, "Biology is not destiny." In other words, the biology with which you are born should not determine who you are and your life chances. Now, a minority of feminists who exclude trans people are saying, biology is destiny. If you are born a biological male, no matter what you feel psychologically and emotionally, and whatever other reproductive capacities or hormonal capacities you may have, that you don't count, that this is irrelevant. I think that's a very, very backward step. And I don't say this hatefully against those feminists who hold this view. Many of them have done great, wonderful things for women, and I salute them. But I think on this issue, they really have gone backward. They've lost the liberating ideals of the early women's liberation movement.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.